Welcome. In this section, we're going to be exploring other blocks provided by WordPress. At this point, you should be comfortable with the basic concepts of Gutenberg development. In this lecture, I'm going to give you a high-level overview of Gutenberg. Right now, I'm on the Gutenberg GitHub repository. Gutenberg splits itself up into multiple modules. All these modules can be found inside the Packages directory. It splits itself up to make things easier to manage and categorize. There are a couple of directories here we've skipped over or haven't gone over yet. To start things off, I'll briefly go over the Blocks and Components folder again. The Blocks folder contains components related to the Gutenberg editor itself. A lot of the components here are only meant for the Gutenberg editor, but there isn't anything stopping you from using them in other areas. The Components folder contains another set of components, but these are very generic components. Currently, they're used for the Gutenberg editor, but they can be used outside of it. There's a possibility that the whole WordPress admin dashboard will be turned into a single-page app. To prepare for that, certain components have been made into generic ones so that they can be reused. You'll find most of them here. The Data folder contains the functionality for creating, managing, and storing data. If you're familiar with React, then you should feel right at home, as WordPress uses a Redux-like management system. If you were to read through this, a word that'll come up often is state. A state is simply an object that contains the current settings of the application. The state will determine how an application behaves and renders. Let me explain with an analogy. Take a moment to think about water and ice. What's the difference between the two? The difference would be their temperature. Just by changing the temperature, you can change how these two appear and behave. If you were to place water inside a freezer, then it would turn into ice. If you were to place it on a hot stove, then it would evaporate and turn into gas. The state changes just by changing one value, the temperature. This idea of changing state applies to programs. Let's say you had a traditional site. If the user is viewing the home page, then they're on the home state. If they're viewing the about page, then they're on the about state. If they're viewing the my account page, then the state would be my account. You get the idea. The state can trickle down to other components. For example, you may have a menu component. If the user is logged in, then the state would contain that information. If they are, then you can have the menu display links to their account. If they weren't, then you would display login and register links. The code inside the data directory contains how the state is managed and controlled. If attributes aren't cutting it for you and you need more control over the state, then you should read up on the information here to understand how the state works. The next directory is the dates directory. One of the most frustrating things about programming is using dates. If you've been programming for a while, then you may know how hard it can be to use dates in any programming language. You have to account for things like formatting, time zones, daylight savings time, etc. Gutenberg has you covered. The date code is built on top of the most popular JavaScript time library, Moments.js. For the most part, you probably won't have to worry about this, but knowing it's around can be helpful in future projects. Up next is the editor directory. This directory will contain code specifically to the editor itself. This will take care of setting up the editor and putting everything together. If you scroll down, then you'll find this diagram here that explains how Gutenberg works. Let's review it together. Things usually start at the saved post point, which is the post content saved in the database. When the editor is initialized, Gutenberg will grab the data and process the block attributes. It's parsing the comments, attributes, and elements for the data. This gets fed into the post state. We just discussed state earlier. The way state is used here is to determine what data gets displayed on the editor. It also determines what settings get displayed. If a user clicks on a paragraph block, then the settings for that block will be displayed. All this data gets turned into blocks and is then rendered on the visual editor. Whenever you make changes, the changes get fed into the state again. The state is constantly changing with every keystroke and mouse click. The cycle is always running whenever you edit your post. The minute you press update or publish, the state data gets serialized and saved into the database. This flow of data is common for most JavaScript applications. If you're a JavaScript developer, then this isn't anything new. Alright, let's keep moving forward. The last directory we'll explore is the element directory. The element directory contains code for creating HTML elements. That's really strange to hear because React already handles that. If you can recall, a few sections ago, I showed you how to create elements with plain JavaScript using the createElement function. There's no need for WordPress to implement this itself. However, WordPress isn't trying to write this from scratch. Instead, it's building on top of it. The reason it does this is so that if React was ever to change its API, then WordPress can make sure that the code you write is backwards compatible. Let's check out the code. Open the react.js file. Immediately, you'll see WordPress is importing a lot of the functions from React like createElement, cloneElement, render, etc. Then, if you scroll down, you'll see that it's exporting those functions. By doing that, you can call these functions by typing wp.element.createElement instead of react.createElement. This allows for the code to be backwards compatible if React ever changes. This is the case for most functions being exported. For the most part, you won't have to worry much if React ever changes. By having this code, you can continue to use the same functions for years to come. Being a master of React isn't necessary. In the next lecture, I'll be showing you how to use these functions. I'll see you there.